So we left off last time where we were about ready to start mixing the plaster. And I have my setup over here. I'm going to mix it and pour it into. We talked a lot about that, the process, but now I just want to see you to see me actually do it. So I have the plaster over here in this bucket, so it doesn't spill everywhere. It's inside the bag like you guys have, and it's the same amount. And what I'm going to do is sprinkle it in there. I want to show you kind of how quickly I do it so that it'll be thoroughly sprinkled around it, but not so slow that it'll start to harden up in the bucket before I get a chance to pour it. So it's a little messy, so you're gonna want to have something down because the powder could get different places. So, and the thing, like I said before, I want to say again is read the rules and methods of pouring and mixing plaster. You do not want to put it wet down the drain. It'll clog up your drain. You can't wash it down. You don't want to put it in your toilet. You want to throw it out in the trash can and let it dry and throw it out. Use a container like this that you don't care about. This is just like a old milk jug or distilled water thing. That doesn't matter if it gets ruined. Before you start, you may also want to kind of, like I'm doing, is kind of breaking up the plaster inside the bag so there's not giant clumps in it. So it's kind of finer powder. That way I won't have to mix it out when I'm in the water. Okay, so I'm going to start the sprinkling method. Hopefully you can see this. Let me see if I can get a close up here. Hold on for 1 second. So I'm taking it out of there and I'm sprinkling it all around the whole container. I don't want to worry too much about spilling it, so I need to do it on a surface that's okay for some of the powder to spill. You don't want to spill the wet plaster though, because that'll stick to a lot of stuff and it's pretty hard to clean up. I'm going a little slow right now, to be honest. So I'm kind of like, I'm not sprinkling it like a tiny bit at a time. I have about like a sizable half handful, and I'm kind of going all the way around and getting it over. You could see if you look down inside of here. Let me see if I can get a good shot. There we go. When I sprinkle it, it goes straight into the water. It's hard to do this from this angle, but here we go. Let me see if I can get a good shot. So there's the bucket. Trying to make sure I get it. There we go. Okay. When you do it in there, it sprinkles in the water. And I'm doing it, and it's getting eaten up by the water. I'm going to do it pretty quick. Okay. So I want to keep going and going and going until it's not really getting eaten up by the water. So I'm going to keep going. I'm going way too slow because I'm talking and showing you. So speed up here a little bit so we don't lose it all. Oop, got a bunch of plaster on the ground. Have to be careful. So it's starting to get more and more full because it's taking longer for it to actually get eaten up. And I can see that there's kind of like islands starting to form. They're not like getting eaten up so quick. And now I'm getting to the point now where it's not really getting eaten up much at all, but I want just a little bit more. Yep, there we go. So you can see directly in here there's an island in there, and it's a little bit crumbling in there, but it's starting to really stay at the top. See how it's barely falling? That means it's the sedimentation, so to speak, like I've been talking about, is being built up, so we're ready to start mixing it. So now I'm going to take my hand in there and really mix in there and get rid of every clump, because I don't want any of those clumps to sit on top of my pattern, because they'll mess up they won't hold the shape of, I don't want to sit on top of my pattern. I don't want it to sit on top of the latex because it won't hold the shape in that spot. And we want this Mothermold is designed, we're designing it so that it'll hold that latex in spot. If it doesn't have something to hold it, that latex is almost just like a balloon. Once you take the tile out, it won't hold its shape. It'll just become a big balloon. So you really need this mother mold to hold that shape of the latex, which has all the detail of the tile. So this is a very important step, not to get it wrong. Now, mixing, 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 mixing. So I got it all really nice and mixed up. And I'm just going to take this thing and do a little twirling in there, just make sure. I'm going to let it set up just a tiny bit more. If you read the instructions, it tells you want to be able to draw a line in it and it doesn't immediately fall down when it's about ready to pour. You have to work fairly quickly with this, otherwise your plaster will get hard in the container. And you need to make sure you put enough in, but not too much, otherwise you end up with something really chunky. You can't use like a sludge or something so thin it won't really dry. You want it to be creamy, like heavy cream, like heavy whipping cream. Not like meringue, or you have to like use a spatula to put it in. It needs to be pourable. So it's getting pretty good there, I can tell. So now I'm going to go over here and move the camera back so you guys can see me pour it into my mold. I have quite a lot of it. I may have even made a little too much, but I doubt it. So I'm going to pour it slowly so that the air doesn't stay in it. And I'm going to kind of move it over the surfaces. Look like I was making a cake with cake batter, filling up every part of my little crevice here so that I can get a solid, good coating over the whole of the latex. Now, I kind of forgot to tell you about a step that's important, which is you want this to be on a level surface. You don't want this to be uneven. And so if you had a level, you could actually put it on there and check the level. But mostly, you can eyeball it to some extent. You want your table to be not like cockeyed and nothing to be under it because you want it to self-level the liquid. Now at this point, you're going to want to lightly tap it. Not heavy because you don't want to bust open the clay and have it go everywhere. And you'll see as I'm tapping it, little air bubbles are coming out. I want to get rid of the air bubbles so that it holds the shape of the latex well. I'll do that a little bit of just agitating it slightly. Now, if you didn't make enough the first time when you did it, it's okay because it's better to make a little less than too much because you don't want to waste your plaster. Like I made it way too much here. Because if you didn't make enough, you could attach plaster to plaster really easily. What you would do is you'd come in here and score after it dries. If you didn't make enough, you would let it dry, and then you would come in and score the plaster with like a fork or something. Get some scratch marks on it, like almost like you're slipping and scoring clay. And then you could make more and pour it, and it would actually stick together fine. The little hash score marks would help it because it would make it grip together better. So that's that right there, basically all set up, ready to go. I'm going to pause for a moment here and get the next part ready to go, and then I'll show you. Now, you'll see that the plaster is starting to dry pretty quickly. It's still wet, but it's going to keep drying and drying. And in about, I don't know, 20 minutes, it'll be start to be fully hard. I'm going to want to wait a little longer than that, though, until it's really set up before I demold it. If I had a little leak, that's why I had this extra clay in case I started having a leak. I could get a ball of it and push it and try to seal up where it might be leaking. But I had a good seal on it so it's not leaking out. So once that's done, I would take and cut, pull off all the clay around it and then slowly demold it. which I'll show you in just a minute once it sets up. I'll pause the video and then come back to you guys when it's setting up and then show you how that works. Now, if you spill any of this dry powder, don't use water to clean it up. Use a dustpan and broom or vacuum, obviously, because if you use water, you're going to create a big muddy mess, and then you're going to make water and plaster make the cement, the plaster type of cement. So you're going to introduce that all over the place. If you can, work outside maybe, or definitely put stuff down, so you're careful. Now I have some plaster left over in this bucket that I made more than I needed. I can either pour this out in the trash liquidy, or better yet, let it harden up in the container, if it's a disposable container, like this is flexible, and pop it out and throw it away hard. It's not toxic. But if you have a bowl that you don't want to have it hardened up in, you need to pour it out and then use something like a cloth and wipe it out fully and get it clean before it hardens up, because it'll stick to things pretty well, even somewhat shiny things. So it's been about 5 minutes, 6 minutes, and it's still not hard yet. It's getting there, but it's going to take about 15 more minutes. Once it does, what I'll do is I'll cut away, just peel away the clay walls, and then I'll flip it over, and I can take my clay tile out of the rubber, but I have to be very careful when I do it. I'll show you kind of how I take this one out. This one's already doesn't have the rubber though, but it'll show you the idea. You're going to flip it over, and then you're going to want to use like a butter knife or something you have to score the back and then pull the tile out. You might have to pull it out in pieces and then clean out the tile to make sure the rubber, you can pop the rubber out and clean it like a little bladder. Make sure it doesn't have any of the clay left in the dirty parts, because that'll come into the next casting. But the same process of the mixing it is what you're going to do to cast the mold as well, which I'll do a video of if I can get the rubber mold done in time. It's going to take a little while because I have to do the layers like you do, so I'm trying to keep ahead of you guys so you can kind of know what the next steps are without having to wait. So I'll do a casting in this one, which is a little different, doesn't quite have the same rubber, but you'll still see the same idea. And I'll keep building up layers on the other one so that you can see the process. But that's basically that. I mean, this is the mother mold stage. So after the mother mold stage, you clean it up, and then the next stage is to demold the actual pattern, the clay tile you made. Get it cleaned out so the mold is very clean on the inside, and then you get into casting the multiples. So casting multiples is where you mix up more plaster and then pour it into the mold and make more than one. When you do that, you're going to want to make sure it's leveled out, like I said about this, because otherwise when you're going to have an open back and you pour the plaster into it, it can really get all over the place if it's not level. And when you're pouring the multiples, you really make a lot less because it's pretty thin tile. I meant to talk to you guys also about when you make your tiles, not to make them too thick or too thin. You'll see on the one I made before, that's about 3/8 of an inch, half an inch-ish, about half an inch maybe. I don't want to get super thick, otherwise it'll take too much plaster and you don't have a ton. But if it's too thin, it's really hard to get it in there, and when you pour it into the back, it just kind of goes in and out of the mold. So you want at least about half an inch thickness of your thumb type of thing. Maybe a little thicker, but not like too thick. Okay? You're better to go a little on the thicker than the thinner side, because otherwise it's really difficult to pour it in there. But you definitely don't want it to be too thick, otherwise you'll run out of plaster. So, alright guys, I'll see you in the next video when I demold, when I take away the clay from the mother mold and show you how I get the pattern out of the mold. So demold the pattern, which is the original sculpture.